Will the Blue Jackets opt for a goalie in the first round for the first time since 2021, or will they go for a couple of well-rounded defensemen? We've got another bonus draft episode of Locked on Blue Jackets to discuss today.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first or second listen of the day. Every single day, Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. So we are continuing with our bonus draft coverage. I did 2 players yesterday. I'm doing 3 players today just because I did the math and was like, I have more players than I can do in 2 players a day for the rest of the week. So today we're going to do 2 options, and then I wanted to do kind of an honourable mention of a player that I don't think will be there when the Blue Jackets pick at 14th, but who I'm a big fan of. And if he is there, Blue Jackets should absolutely take a chance on him. So if you missed yesterday's episode, we talked about Carter Bear and Lindsay Lakovic, a really, really annoying potential top 6 forward and a lanky goal scorer that could be the next Tage Thompson. Today, we're talking about Joshua Ravensbergen. He is a goalie out of the WHL. And we're also going to talk about Cameron Reid and Radim Mrtka, who are 2 very well-rounded defensemen, but also very different defensemen. So we're going to talk about those guys in a second here. We're going to start off with the goalie. We're going to talk about Joshua Ravensbergen, who is, on paper, seems like a pretty safe bet. Now, I will preface this with, when talking about goalies, I always feel the same way when talking about like goalie prospects, right? Is that sometimes it's really, really difficult to know what's going on, because here's the thing. Goalies are voodoo. Goalies make no sense unless you are a dedicated, specific goalie expert that has spent years and years and years watching and analyzing goalies specifically for their translatability into the NHL. It's really difficult to analyze them. It's really difficult to put them in prospect rankings as well, because especially if you get a goalie that's going to go in the first, that's probably going to go in the first round, like Ravensbergen, is his ceiling high enough for you to potentially miss out on a player that can play sooner, right? Because the goalies, it's going to be 3 or 4 years before you see any of the goalies that are drafted in this draft, right? Like the Blue Jackets, I think, have drafted a goalie every year for the past few years. And I don't believe any of their goalie prospects have made even the AHL, right? Last year they took Evan Gardner, who they're pretty big fans of. I'm also a really big fan of Evan Gardner. I'm just pulling up the list of Blue Jackets prospects so I know that I am not just talking nonsense. So last year they took Evan Gardner, who I'm really high on. The year before that, they drafted Melvin Strahl. The year before that, they drafted Sergei Ivanov. Now, Sergei Ivanov is the oldest of the prospects that's not in the AHL currently. Nolan Lalonde is listed as a Blue Jackets prospect, but I don't know that that's going to go anywhere. Jet Greaves is also technically listed as a prospect, but he's not a draft pick. So again, I'm not counting him. So we've got Ivanov, Gardner, and Strahl, plus if they take Ravensbergen tonight. So Ivanov was drafted 3 years ago, and he is still not even in North America, right? And now it's a little bit different for Russian goalies or European goalies, but if we look at the trajectory, it's going to be at least 3 or 4 years before Ravensbergen even gets close to the NHL, right? He is probably going to do another 3 years in juniors and then make the jump to the AHL. Maybe he'll make two. Maybe he'll do 2 years. I can't do the math off the top of my head. He has to turn 20 by January of that season. So I think next year he will be 18. Sorry, he turns 19 in November, so he'll turn 20 the year after that. So I think he's at least 2 more years in his in juniors. Then probably at least a year, probably 2 in the AHL before he's ready to make that jump, right? So a goalie it's a project, right? A goalie is for life, not just for Christmas. So it's tough to, I think, a lot of the time justify taking one in the first round unless they are, supremely talented prospects. I look at Yaroslav Askarov, who was a first round pick. Jesper Wallstedt was a first round pick. I'm very high on him. Sebastian Kosa, another first round pick. Those are the only 3 goalies that have gone in the first round in the last, I think, 5 or 6 years of the draft. And again, Askarov is probably a full-time NHL goalie this season, like coming up, but it's not guaranteed, right? So I can see the risk there, especially if you are confident in your scouting and your development, then if you can get a goalie in the 5th round that you think is going to be a difference maker, why would you spend a first-round pick on him, right? But all that being said, Ravensbergen is a really interesting goalie, I think, because he's enormous, but he doesn't necessarily play like he's enormous, right? He's 6'5", has played a couple of years in the WHL with the Prince George Cougars. Didn't have a great playoffs this season for them, but regular season had a record of 33-13-4, 901 save percentage in 51 games, which for a draft eligible goalie is pretty good, right? But again, it's tough to look at goalies in terms of just their plain stats, right? Because they're so dependent on, well, what team did they play for? What league did they play in? Did they play in Europe in men's teams? Did they play in the QMJHL? Did they play in the WHL? Did they play in the OHL? Did they play college hockey? Right? It's so difficult to predict. That being said, Ravensbergen has had good stats basically his entire time in the WHL. Now he only has 2 seasons worth of evidence there, but something that I always think about when I'm evaluating goalies or when I'm looking at goalies for potential evaluation, because again, I just do this for fun. I know enough about I know enough about prospects to make me dangerous, right? Talking to Will Scouch of Scouching about, how do you analyze a goalie prospect, right? And he's like, well, if they stop the puck at basically every level that they've been at, that's probably a pretty good sign, right? Like Ryan Miller was drafted out of high school hockey and went on to become the winningest American-born goalie of all time, right? Ravensbergen has only got elite prospect stats for the last 2 years. Before that, he played in the BCEHL, which is AAA British Columbia hockey. Now, I don't have save percentages there, but he lost 5 games out of the 24 that he played in his under-18 season, lost 7 of the 19 that he played in his under-18 season, and didn't allow a lot of goals either. He went 6-1 in the playoffs that under-18 season, went 1-0 in the playoffs the year after that. Again, I don't have actual numbers, but it's a pretty good sign, right? Ravensbergen himself, again, very big goalie, is a right catcher, which is unusual and kind of fun. There's only a handful of those in the NHL right now. I think both of the Washington goalies are right catchers, and I think there's a couple of other guys floating around as well, which I always think is fun. But the thing about Ravensbergen is that he is, again, very big, which is sometimes a problem, right? Because sometimes if a goalie is too big, it just leaves all sorts of holes, right? There's a lot of talk about what the ideal size for a goalie is, and some people say, it's 6'4". Some people say, I'm not drafting a goalie into my organization if he's any shorter than 6'2". Now, obviously, short goalies can, quote unquote, beat the odds. Look at Dustin Wolf in Calgary. Look at Jet Greaves in Cleveland and in Columbus this year, right? Like, he's allegedly 6 foot, but I don't buy it. But then you get to goalies that are 6'6", 6'7", and that's just a little bit too tall, right? So Ravensbergen for me is kind of in that sweet spot of he's probably an inch or two too tall for him to be like the perfect height, but he has a lot of confidence. He's really calm in net, which is not nothing, right? And I feel like, especially for young goalies, they tend to be kind of like frenetic and frantic, right? Like, I often talk about they have this kind of cat with a laser pointer style, which is not a bad thing, right? Like, Jonathan Quick has that cat with a laser pointer style, and again, he's one of the most successful American goalies of all time, and he dragged the LA Kings to a cup basically all by himself in 2012, right? So I think being like Jonathan Quick is not a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that you see it a lot in young goalies is that they react a lot, and that sometimes leads to overreaction, and you don't see that in Ravensbergen's game, which is fun and also promising, because it's usually something that they grow out of. But if he's already there, then basically he's kind of a step ahead of that, right? Now, the reports are his rebound control is not great. He needs to work on like tracking the puck. But he's extremely calm. He's extremely technical. And if he can figure out the rebound control, which I think is one of the harder things to figure out as a goalie, seems like he's going to be a pretty good prospect, both as like a draft pick and also as a player. Blue Jackets are reportedly very high on Ravensbergen. They did take him out to dinner when they were in Buffalo for the combine a couple of weeks ago. Again, I still don't know if the Blue Jackets pick at 14 and 20, but I've got to think that if Ravensbergen's there at 20, I think the Blue Jackets are genuinely like, okay, well, unless someone else on their list has slid, I think Ravensbergen might be the pick at 20, which will be interesting. You can never have too many goalies. Like, I'm not mad about the pick. Again, like, the Blue Jackets have done a decent job building up their goalie prospect pool. There are other players that I like a lot at that potential 20th pick as well, but if they have to take a goalie, like, I feel pretty good about Ravensbergen. There are other goalies that I like as well. Like, I'm a big fan of Mans Goose, who has one of the better names in the NHL this year, and he's probably going to be a third round or later pick. Again, take another goalie. There's no such thing as too many goalies, right? The worst thing that happens is that they all develop into good prospects, and then you get to trade them to teams that don't have good goalie prospects, which is like half the league at this point, I feel like, right? So that's my thoughts on Ravensbergen, is that he is promising. I don't necessarily think it's high risk, high reward, but I would say it's probably medium risk, high reward, because again, if you can get a franchise goalie, that's obviously great, right? And I know that the organization is high on Ivanov and high on Gardner, but it sounds like they're really high on Ravensbergen as well. And again, if the worst thing that happens is you have too many good goalies, like, that's a pretty good problem to have. So I'm not against it. There is another, again, there are more players that I like at that kind of 20th-ish position, but I'm not mad if they end up taking Ravensbergen home. Again, it's gonna be a long time before we see him in the NHL, but he has all of the tools to put it together and be a really good prospect for this team. Let's switch up talking about goalies and let's go to defensemen. So there's a couple of guys that I want to talk about here. One of them is a guy that again has kind of been linked to Columbus a couple of times. He's been drafted at 20th on a couple of like draft rankings, mock drafts, etc. And that's Cameron Reid. I also want to talk a little bit about Radim Mrtka. A little bit less so. We're not going to spend a ton of time on him just because I don't think he's going to be there at 14. He is a guy that is probably going to go in the top 10. I like him a lot as a player. If he's there at 14, great. I just don't think he's going to be. But I just really like his game, so I want to talk about him a little bit. But we'll talk about Cameron Reid first, who is a kind of one of the more underrated prospect, in my opinion. He's not ranked particularly high in a lot of places. Again, I saw a couple of places that rank him 20th, but I think that's about the highest that I've seen him. Like, he is around about there on Bob McKenzie's rankings. He's around about there on Ferrari's rankings. Like he has climbed up the rankings in recent like times, but Cameron Reid is a smaller defenseman who is extremely well developed defensively and is figuring out the offense. He's a really good two-way defenseman. I think he's more defensively minded than offensively minded, which is great. Extremely good skater. Good at using his body despite being, as I say, small. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. So he's not like small, but he's undersized for a defenseman, I feel like. But he makes up for that. He's got great skating. He's got incredible hockey IQ. His rush play is great. His off-puck play is pretty good. He lacks a little bit of consistency, which again is expected for young defensemen. He sometimes becomes a little bit disengaged, I think a lot of that is maybe you get that sometimes for players who are a little bit above the level that their league is in, right? So he played in the OHL this season for the Kitchener Rangers, and is again sometimes you outgrow your league a little bit. I'm not saying that he's good enough to jump into the NHL straight away, but I do think he is kind of sometimes feels like, oh, I can't, I'm playing the game on easy mode, right? And sometimes when you do that, you switch off a little bit, and then what happens is you get beaten because you're not paying attention, right? And I think that's something that he's going to have to work on. But I think that's something that will come in time, right? Like, if he makes the jump to the AHL, which he won't for a couple of years, because again, the CHL NHL agreement, he is a guy that once you increase the challenge, he will increase to match that, right? So I'm not super worried about the fact that he sometimes unplugs a little bit. I think his IQ more than makes up for it. I think his skating makes up for it. His offensive game is developing. I do still think that, again, the dream is if you get a guy like him that you pair him with another two-way guy like Matejchuk, right? And then what you could do is one of them could do defense and one of them could do offense. And depending on what side of the ice they're on, they can flip that. They can figure it out. They can take it in turns. I'm thinking a lot about the very early years of Seth Jones and Zach Werenski, right? Now, Zach Werenski is never going to be the most defensively responsible guy, but he made it work when Seth Jones jumped up in the offense, right? Is that he would stay back. And I'm kind of seeing a similar-ish potential relationship there between someone like a Matejchuk and someone like a Reid. I like Reid a ton. Again, he's probably going to be a later round pick. I think he should probably go higher, but I think he's probably going to drop a little bit. Really, it depends on when defensemen start getting taken off the board, right? Because there's always fewer high-end defensemen than there is high-end forwards, right? Everyone wants to draft a center. So we'll see what happens when, guys like Mrtka start getting taken, and that'll probably impact, what happens to a guy like Cameron Reid. But I like him a lot. I think he's got top 4 potential, probably middle pairing potential. But if he, keeps developing at the path and here's the thing as well about Reid is that I don't even think that there's anything that he needs to specifically work on. There's nothing that he needs to go home this summer and work on purpose, right? I think it is just a case of getting reps in. I think it's a case of just keep doing what you're doing, right? And that's something I always like to ask prospects. What do you want to work on this summer? What do you think is what are you going to do this summer to make yourself as ready as possible for next season? They're always well, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. And I don't think there's anything that he needs to specifically work on necessarily. I'd like the offense to be a little bit better, but I think that, again, that's going to come in time. I think it's just a case of just keep doing reps, keep doing what you're doing, and the things that you need to improve on, you will just kind of improve on through repetition. So I'm pretty high on Reid. He's a guy that I like a lot. Again, if it comes down to Ravensbergen versus Reid at 20th, that's going to be a really tough option for me. I think I might go Reid just because I think that his ceiling is so good. I think there's a ton of potential there. Like I said, that I think he probably tops out as a middle pairing guy, but there is that top pairing. He does have top pairing potential on the right team. And again, he's going to be probably another slow-ish boil for a player. Defenseman take a little bit longer. Obviously, he doesn't have that size that Don Waddell likes when he's drafting him, but the skating is good enough that honestly that might cancel out. And I think he would be an excellent person to pair with Matejchuk if they get 3 years down the line and they haven't found that permanent partner for Matejchuk, which again is a whole other thing. Because for me right now, you find a placeholder to play with Matejchuk, sign someone for 2 or 3 years, whether that's Gavrikov, whether that's whoever you want, and go from there, right? And then hopefully by that time, someone like Alex, someone like potentially a Cameron Reid can step in and be Matejchuk's long-term defense partner. So that's kind of how I see Reid. Again, I like him a lot. I think I like him over Ravensbergen, which I know is strange because, we are all goalies all the time here at Locked On Blue Jackets. But there's so much upside with Reid. I think he's such an incredibly smart player. And he feels like a player that will thrive in the Blue Jackets system or the Blue Jackets development program because they are one of the better developing teams recently, I feel like. So that's again, and then it comes down to, okay, well, do you take Reid over someone like a Lyndon Lakovic, who could also potentially be there at 20th? And I think I'm like, I think I take Reid over Lakovic as well. I like Lakovic a lot, but so far, I think my picks of the guys that we've looked at, I'm like, okay, well, Bear at 14, Reid at 20. And let's be done with it. Like, that might change again as I go into this week of draft stuff and start talking about more guys. But as it stands right now, that's, I think, what I would do of the guys we've talked about. There's a bunch of guys that I haven't talked about. One of whom we're going to talk about in just a second here, who is absolutely my pick at 14 if he's available, but I don't think he is. But Cameron Reid is going to be a great choice. We'll see if he's there at 20. I think he will be. And so I think it's going to be really interesting, again, if the Blue Jackets even make that pick. Let's talk about Radim Mrtka, who is, again, another good two-way guy, but in a very different way to Reid. Mrtka is enormous, had 35 points in 43 games as a defenseman. Played with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL, only scored 3 goals, but 35 points in 43 games for a defender is great. Has good skating, not good skating for a big guy, just good skating. Is a reasonably good defender. I think that he probably leans more offensive than defensive, but he's just enormous, right? And I know that he's not a shutdown defenseman necessarily. He's one of those guys that I think, he has really great defensive IQ, but I think that what that translates to is, the best defense is a good offense, right? It's very much the puck goes into the zone, and very shortly after that, the puck comes out of the zone, usually on his stick, which is fun. He's got great puck moving ability. He's a right shot defenseman, which people love. Plays a ton of minutes. Again, is just enormous. He has physical skills. I think he needs to be a little bit more physical, but I think, again, that'll come as he continues to fill out. Again, he's 6'6" and just a shade under 200 pounds. So he's not quite as lanky as some guys, but he is still he's got some filling out to do. But I like him a lot. I think he's probably one of the top 2 defensemen in this draft, potentially the best defenseman in the draft. And I really genuinely don't think that he lasts to 14. He might. That'd be really great. Again, if he's there at 14, Don Waddell better break a hip running to that stage. I know that the draft is decentralized, but if he's there, you have to take him at 14. I just really genuinely don't think he will be, and that's a shame because, again, I like him a lot, and I think he is more pro-ready than a guy like Reid. I think he's, again, you give him another year in the WHL at least, and then see what happens. I could see a Matejchuk-like trajectory for him, even though they're, they're not the same player. But I'm really high on Mrtka, and I really, really don't think he's going to be there at 14, which sucks because I think he immediately, if you draft him, he immediately becomes the best defensive prospect that the Blue Jackets have. Bearing in mind that Matejchuk, I don't really consider a prospect anymore, right? Mrtka, probably going to be ready a little bit more ready faster than Reid, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know that Mrtka has top pairing potential. I think he is a middle six guy, but he's a right shot defenseman. He's enormous, great skater, succeeds at both ends of the ice. Like, he is the perfect Don Waddell draft pick. And it sucks. It's a shame that, I wonder if there's been kind of whispers recently that the Blue Jackets are potentially considering packaging 14 plus 20, probably plus something else to move up in the draft. And I wonder if that's to try and catch Mrtka before someone like the Penguins swoop in and take him, because I believe the Penguins are picking 11 and 12 overall. I feel similarly about, not to segue, like Victor Eklund is on my list. I love Victor Eklund. If he's there at 14, I like him way more than Mrtka. He's a top 5 talent in this draft, if you ask me. So again, he's definitely not going to be there at 14. I'm probably going to talk about him at some point in this series, just because I like him so much. But he's in a similar boat of, I like him, I would love him on the team. I think he would be a perfect fit on the team. But he's not going to be there at 14. So again, he's a guy that I would consider moving down for, or moving up in the draft for, if you can swing it. But we'll see. Again, there are many moving parts, and it feels like nothing's moving at the minute. I know that everyone, myself included, are kind of like, well, what's happening? Why aren't the Blue Jackets doing anything? Other teams are doing things, right? Like, you should have been in on Mason Marchment. You should be, like, people are talking about, Marner is making his decisions, and Vegas is trying to clear cap space for Marner. And I think a lot of people are like, Don Waddell, do something, do anything. So again, we'll see. I think there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and I think it's probably going to come together quite quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if one thing happens and then something else happens 30 minutes later and something happens 30 minutes after that, right? But as of right now, Blue Jackets are drafting 14th and 20th overall in the draft on Friday. I'm going to keep doing these as long as we have picks to talk about for them. And I'm kind of enjoying it. Again, I haven't done a lot of draft stuff this year just because I haven't. There's been so much going on, and the Blue Jackets haven't had a lottery pick, which has kind of been nice. So I've kind of unplugged from the draft a little bit, but I am enjoying talking about these guys. So hopefully I get to keep doing that. But we'll see. We'll see how long it takes the Blue Jackets to either take those picks or send them somewhere else. But that's it for today. My bonus episode. Thank you for listening, making it your first or second listen of the day every single day. Tomorrow, we're going to have more draft content in the evening. In the morning episode, I believe the plan is to talk about Noah Dobson as an option, who I think is a much better option than Rasmus Andersson, but will also cost much more. So it really comes down to, is the increased cost worth the increase on the ice? But that's going to be tomorrow morning's episode. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO-Blue Jackets on Blue Sky. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. If you have prospects that you want to suggest that I cover that you think I might not already have on my list, feel free to send those in as well. Once again, tomorrow we're going to be doing Noah Dobson and a couple more prospects in the evening. Until then, make sure you stay locked on.